And we are live.
Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. Today is July 22nd, 2018, 6 p.m. Eastern. And what time is it now? 1 o'clock in the morning where I am at. We're going to be live here for the next hour talking about the top news that happened all this week, Monday, all the way up till today, Sunday. And of course, we're going to get into the White Helmets, Carter Page, WikiLeaks, Podesta, and of course, a lot more. And of course, this broadcast is going to be going out on podcast and Twitter and Facebook, but mainly we're going to be communicating with you guys on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/WeAreChange, where, of course, Super Chats take priority since they help keep us a fully independent news organization and not corporate government shills like the rest of media that you usually consume. So, yes, as I'm currently here in Lithuania, Vilnius, Jason Bermas is holding down the house in upstate New York. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing A-OK in the hot New York weather. How is that Lithuanian weather, Luke?
It's actually like pristine. It's like perfect. It's like 70 degrees at night, 75, maybe 80 degrees during the day. And it's like, yeah, you just walk around with a t-shirt, long pants if you want. It doesn't bother you. You don't get the sweats in all the uncomfortable areas. And I got to tell you, Lithuania is just utterly incredible. I've been here a month ago. I got sent out here by the Pillar Unconference, which was a kind of new kind of cryptocurrencies that is building a new blockchain crypto wallet. And they brought me out here. They put me up at some crazy resort, and I just love it here. So I got an extra day. I'm literally staying in a room with like 3 beds. I'm gonna pan the camera around just a little bit. Huge room, sofa, couch, free breakfast, all for $25 a day. It's incredible how people live here in Eastern Europe. Definitely a place that I strongly recommend people go out there and visit. And people always ask me all the time, like, how the hell do you afford to travel all the time? How does this make sense? Well, it's very simple. One, you travel hack. Two, if you have a car, you could Toro it. If you have an apartment, you could Airbnb it, and you stay in places like in Lithuania, where places like this are for $25 a day, and you save more money than you would living in a place like New York City, where everything is just up the wazoo expensive, to say the least. I remember even before here, my whole schedule has been just utterly insane. Within the last 8 or 9 days, I ended up in Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. Then from Freedom Fest all the way in Las Vegas, I came to Lisbon, Portugal, where I was at the Infinite Man Conference. After the Infinite Man Conference, took a train up to Porto, Portugal, for Anarcha, Portugal. And then shortly after that, I had to go to here, Vilnius, Lithuania. Tomorrow I go traveling somewhere. So Jason, you got to fill in and do an extra video. But even in Porto, an amazing, beautiful place. Strongly recommend people visit Porto. Extremely affordable. I remember me, Jeff Berwick, the Dollar Vigilante, and his wife went out to dinner. And of course, Jeff likes to just go all out all the time. So we had appetizers, a full course meal. Of course, we had fermented grape juice. A lot of fermented grape juice. We had desserts. Jeff always gets the most expensive scotch that is there after his meal. And then the check came, and I just grabbed it first without even, just thinking about anything. And I looked at it, and it was like $100, $100 for a full meal for 3 people. And I just, finally was able to be like, Jeff, yeah, I got this. Don't worry. And Jeff was like, oh no, how much is it? I'm like, no, man, no, it's cool. It's cool. I got this time around, since Jeff always pays for a lot of the dinners when we're out. So it's just incredible in Porto, Portugal, incredible in Lithuania. Definitely recommend people travel, get out there, see the world, experience the world, because it's so different than, of course, what the media is telling you what it is. And we're more connected than we are separated. And you really let go of that divide and conquer scheme bullcrap and hating the fellow man once you get out there on the road, put yourself in a kind of vulnerable situation and meet all these incredible human beings and be a part of all these conferences, which I've been very blessed to be a part of. So enough ranting about me. We got a lot of news to cover, Jason. What are some of the top articles you want to talk about, and anything else you want to talk about your own life, Jason?
Now, let's just get to the nitty gritty because this is a huge story. Ecuador is in the process of giving Assange up after 8 years. This guy has been in solitary confinement, basically in a room, over the last, I believe, 8+ months. He's been without internet access. And this could
Yeah, eight
end.
years detained in the Ecuadorian embassy, not being able to go outside, with the British authorities spending millions and millions of pounds on security for just Julian Assange, having police officers and undercover agents wait outside of the Ecuadorian embassy now for 8 years. The security costs of that have been staggering. And this is, Jason, this is all over. The major charge that they have him on is a minor bail violation, which at most would get someone in the UK for 3 months. That is the only official charge that they have against this man, Julian Assange.
Yeah, and let's
Sorry,
not
go ahead.
forget when they were first trying to vilify him and make him into a arch demon criminal, they talked about a date rape charge where he took home a woman, she willingly had sex with him, and then like in the morning or the middle of the night he tried to slip it in again or did or something, and she didn't consent to that, and then all of a sudden, and by the way, most of that's been proven false. They said that's why they wanted them. They've tried to say this wasn't political for the longest times. Now, we'll get to the Carter Page story much later, but WikiLeaks again and again is referenced in that document, in all of these documents, colluding with Russia. Well, we know that the Guccifer 2.0 hacker used a Russian VPN on purpose, Luke. Do you think that means he's Russian, or do you think that means he's actually masking his identity and trying to be caught as a quote-unquote Russian? I mean, that indictment that we've seen of those 12 Russians is paper thin, especially when it comes to Guccifer. But the point here is that we have Pence coming in, talking with them. He's probably going to be extradited to the United States, and this is the end of free speech. This trial will end free speech forever. Go ahead.
People have to understand, this is not an issue about Julian Assange, which he isn't a perfect human being. He made some mistakes and errors throughout his career, especially throughout WikiLeaks. He's not a perfect human being. But this is not about Julian Assange. This is about the First Amendment. Because if they're going to go after Julian Assange, they should go after The Guardian, the New York Times, that also publicized a lot of the documents and talked about a lot of the documents that were classified, that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks was able to get out there to the general public. Overall, I think he did a very big public service, and I think it's important to understand how exactly everything is happening here, because a lot of this started when Julian Assange criticized the Spanish government when they were going against their independence movement in Barcelona, in Catalan. And Julian Assange was threatened by Ecuador, saying, stop talking about these Catalan Barcelona independence protests that want to be separated from the Spanish government. Julian Assange said, nope, I won't do that. And because of that, because of the Spanish government pressuring the Ecuadorian government, they cut off his internet. And he's been without the internet for a very long time, just sitting in a room, ultimately being able to see his lawyers sometimes, but it's pretty much just him being in jail. And I think they did this on purpose to cut off his popularity, cut off him from making any significant moves, since, as we've seen, Julian Assange threatened many times releasing keys that could be put together later on, like a safe, what do they call it, Jason? Like a vault safe, in order to protect. A fail safe in order to protect himself. He made very generalized statements saying he has more information, that if anything happens to him, use these keys to release the information later on. So without a doubt, the British authorities, according to many sources and many news publications, are going to apprehend him, and most likely, and I think it's almost pretty sure that he's going to be extradited to the United States. That battle within itself, that extradition, could take a year to 3 years. So most likely he's going to end up in solitary confinement in jail during the extradition process, which of course he's going to fight. But as we know, Trump said before he loves WikiLeaks. Many WikiLeaks supporters like Kim.com have even come out publicly and said Trump wouldn't be president if it wasn't for people like Julian Assange, like WikiLeaks. Trump endorsed him, said he loved him, but Trump officials are calling for him to be prosecuted and thrown in jail. Mike Pompeo, the former CIA head and now Secretary of State under Donald Trump, called WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence organization. So we have to understand what most likely is going to happen here. He's going to get out of the Ecuadorian embassy by force by the British authorities sometime this week or next week, since the Ecuadorian president is within the United Kingdom. And he's going to Spain right afterwards, very symbolically. And he's most likely going to be arrested there and then face an extradition trial to the United States because of a secret sealed indictment that the United States has against him. Because again, and I don't see Donald Trump coming out and helping him, even though he said he loved WikiLeaks, mainly because all of the officials that he surrounded himself with hate and despise WikiLeaks. But there is a double standard that I wanted to bring up to everyone and to bring up to you before I let you have the last word on this very important issue. Here, I sent the article in the chat room so people could read it for themselves. And this is an article by The Intercept that is covering this specific story, that is covering the movements of the Ecuadorian president who is in the United Kingdom. And the article reads, indeed, it is technically a crime under U.S. law for anyone, including a media outlet, to publish certain types of classified information. Under U.S. law, for instance, it was a felony for the Washington Post, David Ignatius, to report on the contents of telephone calls intercepted by the NSA between then National Security Advisor nominee Michael Flynn and Russian Ambassador Sergei Kazyak, even though such reporting was clearly in the public interest since it proved Flynn lied when he denied such contacts. But the Department of Justice never went after the Washington Post, never went after the people who work in their benefit, but the people who actually expose the information that counters their narrative, that counters people's trust in the government. They're going full on heavy-handed. And if they go after Assange and they get him, the implications for the First Amendment are very severe. Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking globally here, Luke. We're not just talking about the United States of America. This sets a extremely bad precedent. But another one of these hawks that Trump has surrounded himself with is John Bolton. And John Bolton wants people like Edward Snowden to swing from a tree. And he is very anti-WikiLeaks. But you're right, we had a president who says, I love the WikiLeaks coming out. I know that WikiLeaks themselves pumped out a video, or someone did of them. It's like 2.5 minutes of Trump talking about how much WikiLeaks helped him during the election. And you know what? You want me to ride that Trump train, folks? You want me to get on the saddle and ride away? This is what we do. Trump says, hey, you know what? We're going to let you off the hook. We're actually going to give you asylum here, okay? And we're going to do so when you release all this documentation you have on the government that's dirty. That would get me on the Trump train. That would be a man of the people. Don't you agree, Luke?
And it's not going to happen, and I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future, because all it takes is simply not trying to extradite him, which everyone, of course, fears will happen. Obviously, it's not really a spoken thing by U.S. representatives. But again, remember, this is not an issue just about Julian Assange. This is a matter of journalism and the future of journalism, because if they could bring Julian Assange to trial because of this, they could do it to every journalist in the future that releases or talks about classified information that the government does not want them, the people, to know. And of course, with the long history of American journalism, muckraking, whistleblowing journalism that happened, this is a key integral part of the fourth estate of the government, the fourth branch of government, having a free media, which we don't. We have a corporate government one. But regardless of that fact, this is still a very dangerous president that hopefully, it's I can't even say hopefully, because it's looking like he's going to be forced out of there very soon. But we're going to be covering it very closely on this YouTube channel. And let's move on to the next story, which is another story talking about something that was supposed to be secret, but then again was exposed to the general public. Jason?
Yeah, you know, again, here we have Israel getting behind U.S. foreign policy and telling us what to do, and then bragging about it in kind of an open forum, you know, to some of his constituents, didn't know it was being recorded. But Netanyahu basically boasted that Israel, Luke, is the reason that Trump left the Iran deal. Now, I think that this is one of the worst moves of his presidency, despite what he said in Helsinki, how they're treating them with respect, and it was a good thing. No, I think, once again, had he not just removed us from that deal, but maybe set up a historic summit like the one he just had with Putin, with Iranian leaders, imagine that, sitting down and discussing things, I think that would have been the approach. But instead, we're doing Israel's bidding. And of course, this lumps in with the Syrian situation, the white helmets, which we're going to get into much later. But it really does show you that Netanyahu and Israel, their influence in the United States and their policy is very real, Luke.
Yeah, this story came out Monday this week. That's why we're talking about it right now. But you have to admit, Israel's lobby is extremely effective. The collusion between Trump's officials, the U.S. government, and Israel are extreme, to say the least. And the Iran nuclear deal was a deal that prevented Iran from building nuclear weapons. It eased some of the sanctions, and overall, from many independent analysts and experts, was a great deal that worked out to the benefit of everyone. This is why Trump did the North Korea deal, which was a very similar deal. You don't want regimes building nuclear war. You want them to prosper independently, economically, without any hindrance from the United States, including all the sanctions that they put on them. And with Israel just bragging and boasting how they were able to make a really bad deal for not only the United States, but for the world in order to have a benefit to just their own country, and brings them closer to war with Iran, is just incredulous, to say the least, and needs to be talked about. Everyone's talking about Russian collusion, Russian collusion, Russian collusion. The collusion with Israel is there. The Israeli government was caught multiple times spying on U.S. officials, on the U.S. government, but no one dares to talk about the damn I question, and we talk about it in an honest and fair way. This is an article from the Times of Israel. I'm going to send it to the chat room so people could verify everything that we're saying here. We don't come out from a perspective of just bigotry and hatred and racism, but this issue needs to be discussed, and it's not. And it is a severe issue that is not working in the interest of the United States. It is working for the interest of an individual country that to me, it should be independent, and would be better if they were independent out of the United States. All the countries would be good if just everyone was just independent and not colluding with each other, like we're seeing clearly happening here.
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. And if you check out my film, Fabled Enemies, actually going to be the 10th anniversary of its release this September 11th. There's a large section of Israeli involvement, not only in 9/11, but like you said, the Israeli Mossad infiltrating large-scale U.S. government agencies on a level that Russia could only imagine, Luke. You know, they've got red-headed hussies infiltrating the NRA, and that's big news. Well, you know what wasn't big news? When prior to 9/11, these guys had set up a fake art student ring and literally infiltrated every major intelligence operation in the United States. And that was actually done by Tony Snow at one point out of Fox News, and who's the other guy? Carl Cameron. Okay, Tony Snow ended up being the White House press secretary. I just want to put that out there, folks. It's not like this was an irreputable smear report. And of course, people all the time attack me that I'm covering up for Israel in 9/11. They refuse to admit that, 10 years ago, Luke, I put out a movie with all of this information. They don't even want to acknowledge it. It's kind of hysterical. But the fact of the matter is, Israel has a lot more to do with infiltrating our foreign and domestic policy than Russia could ever dream of. Yet we're sitting here talking about frickin' Russia, Luke.
Yeah. And of course, I'm looking at the chat room right now. We're not going to be baited by the bigots. Jason, you shouldn't even give that any attention, because, of course, everyone always wants to push their agenda, wants you to go too far, wants you to go too crazy. We're talking about the facts here. We're talking about the sources here that we're sending you guys so you can make up your own mind. And it's important to report on this issue, and it's sad that not many people are. So that was Monday's story. What's Tuesday's story?
Well, the next story is, of course, about the Vegas shooting where the Mandalay Bay, a.k.a. MGM Resorts, Luke, has decided that they're going to just sue thousands of the victims that survived. And they're doing this, not because they're asking for money, but they themselves don't want to be sued, and they want to basically take away all liability from themselves when I think they have quite a bit of liability just from the public information that we have and the videotapes that have been released. This is kind of a scumbag move. Rather than an admission of guilt, trying to set up a fund, realizing that they're going to have to pay, and so are their insurance companies. No, we're going to play the lawyer card, and we are going to sue people preemptively that were shot at from our resorts. Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, everything that happened in Las Vegas during that incident just stinks to high heaven. There's a reason the media is not talking about it. And technically what's happening here is that they're just denying liability so they can't be sued. But still a horrible, horrible PR move that people on the internet went wild after hearing the news of. And I don't know what they were thinking that they could keep this away from the general public. But obviously, they're losing a lot of support. They definitely lost the PR war. And I believe they are liable. A lot of people are liable for what happened in Las Vegas, including with some of the video footage that we've seen of police officers just waiting in the hallway as the shooting was happening for over 5 minutes. The video is pretty crazy because as that's happening, we had how many people? 58 people being murdered, 800 people injured, and with the video of the police officers just waiting for 5 minutes as this is happening, this brings a lot of things into doubt and a lot of things into question, especially when it comes to the whole subject of liability. But as if you've been watching this YouTube channel, you know that the police legally have argued this in court, in many court proceedings, that they don't have any obligation to protect you nor serve you. So that is also a very important aspect of this entire case that people need to look into, as well as a lot of just the amount of craziness involved in this entire Las Vegas story. But I know you probably have a lot more to say about that. But if you don't, let's go to Wednesday's story.
Well, one more thing. I do want to point out that through this lawsuit, they're trying to declare this an act of terrorism based on laws passed after 9/11. Now, to me, again, there's been no proof of terrorism here. There's been no connection to Al-Qaeda or ISIS. So I got to tell you, Luke.
There has been a connection to pedophilia since the shooter's brother was charged with having pedophilia on his computer.
Yeah, and then he was actually had those charges dismissed. But they also said, Luke, they found pedophilia on Stephen Paddock's computer as well. There's a lot to this story that we
and
are
a
not
very
being
shady
told.
background with him having private jets and flying all over the entire world that really put a lot of questions and still a very questionable motive of what drove this person to do this.
Yeah, again, we don't know really any of the real details outside of the forensic evidence we've seen. We've seen the FBI control this investigation from the start, and the evidence we've seen leaves a lot to be desired. So, we're going to be following this lawsuit and any kind of information on the Las Vegas shooting because it is one of those big events that has yet to be explained, Luke.
Yeah, and it definitely does need to be explained since it was one of the biggest mass shootings in U.S. history. But moving into a very related story, with Wednesday's story, we have Fox News with a headline saying this marks the end of gun control. And the article reads that the U.S. Justice Department announced a legal settlement and its surrender to the First Amendment arguments that were made on July 10th in a case brought by Cody Wilson, founder of Defense Distributed. And as we know, Cody Wilson, I talked to him a number of times personally myself. He was the person who built the blueprint behind a 3D printable gun. And it looks like the U.S. Justice Department is stepping down some of the charges that they tried to file on him, since under the Obama administration, the State Department served Wilson with a letter threatening criminal prosecution for violating federal export controls. And as we know, what Cody did was ultimately put up the blueprint. He uploaded it, and hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world downloaded it and have the capabilities to print their own 3D printed gun. So a lot of people who are in favor of the Second Amendment are calling this, of course, a major victory. And overall, I think it makes sense, because how can you stop a link being shared online. Of course, they do in many different instances. How can you stop the intellectual property like that? And to me, and from my own personal point of view, there's no way you could try to limit the Second Amendment, especially in the United States, where it's estimated that 130 million Americans have over 400 million guns in the United States alone. And as we know, if criminals want guns, we've seen this in examples, especially in places like Chicago, they will get guns no matter what the gun laws are. There are way too many gun laws. That restrict a lot of good people from having guns. And of course, the criminals will always find a way, especially in the United States, where there's 400 million guns all over the place. That's my opinion. What do you think on it?
I think that this is a big win for freedom of speech as well, because with 3D printing technology, we're not just talking about weapons. The blueprints for just about anything could be uploaded. Now, right now, it's mostly hobbyists, Luke. It's people that are in certain industries. But we've seen these printers now use concrete, build homes. In the next 20 to 30 years, 3D printing is going to be a huge thing. So being able to share schematics that hopefully will not be, copyrighted, people will give open source, goes far, far, far beyond just guns and weapons. This is a win for not only the Second Amendment, but a huge win for free speech, in my opinion.
Well, definitely, because, usually people want to protect themselves, especially in the United States, where there's criminal enterprises that thrive in gun-free zones, and that has been the case in many places, and that's why we're seeing a lot of crime in Chicago and a lot less crime in states like Texas that have stronger, severe allowment and freedom of gun ownership, and people are usually very polite to each other because they know people are packing. So that's also a very important aspect. That's specifically to the United States. Other countries have other track records. People could point out to different countries all over the world and make different arguments, but this is just one specifically talking about the United States over a very complicated issue that, of course, is only getting more complicated with the latest technological advancements, and, of course, 3D printing giving the power for anyone to now make a gun. Very interesting times we're living in, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next story is Thursday?
Yes. It's the Tony Podesta story in which he's offered immunity, Luke. This is crazy stuff. Podesta still hasn't been indicted for anything. And by the way, this has nothing to do with the Hillary Clinton emails, which he should have been investigated and, quite frankly, indicted for numerous things. If anybody wanted to read those.
Just so people know here, we're talking about Tony Podesta, who is John Podesta's brother, who did business with John Podesta, who has the Podesta Group with his brother, who of course also worked and was the chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. And Tony Podesta worked with Paul Manafort in an organization where they were representing the interest of the Ukrainian government, which is against Russia, in the United States, and they didn't register as a foreign agent correctly. And because they did it incorrectly, that's why Paul Manafort has been sent to jail. He's in solitary confinement. He is facing life in jail. And for the same crime that Tony Podesta committed, Tony Podesta is getting to walk away free under this investigation and is given immunity for snitching on Paul Manafort. One person connected to Hillary Clinton, another person connected to Donald Trump, both of the same charges, but one gets to walk free, one is facing life in prison. A lot of bias there by the Mueller investigation there, just to say the least, Jason.
Yeah, and again, he wasn't indicted for anything in the Clinton emails. Nobody was. No charges. Still no charges on this guy. Remember, the guy with the same crime that he's going to testify against is in solitary confinement. Let's not forget that one of the main emails that Mr. Tony Podesta was involved in was actually a big story for WeAreChange back in the day. It was the infamous spirit cooking email. You see, Marina Abramovich, the performance artist who did a 1970s performance piece that included, fecal matter, urine, some other things, let's just say of a sexual and menstruating nature. Well, she does that in private, Luke. If you go to her Ask Me Anything Reddit things where she does this personally, And guess where she was doing it? Tony Podesta's home. And you know who she was asking for? His good old brother Johnny Podesta to come by. That's not weird. It's not terrible that Tony Podesta's Podesta Group, defends the Saudi Arabians against the family members' lawsuits for 9/11. That's not detestable. This Tony Podesta, I'd like to have dinner with him. He seems like a gentleman.
Yeah. That's a very important case, because if the kind of Mueller investigation that's going after Manafort right now was really after exposing a lot of the corruption, exposing a lot of the wrongdoing, they would switch that role around and go after Tony Podesta, since John and Tony Podesta and the Podesta Group are pretty much representing the main interest of Saudi Arabia, which a lot of the Saudi officials who were connected to the Podesta Group were actually arrested by the Saudi Crown Prince just a few months ago for corruption. So if you want to unearth some corruption, you go after the people representing the Saudi Arabians in the United States, and I bet your bottom dollar you will find a lot. But I guess that whole investigation is not really interested in that at all, but they're interested in Trump's person. Not Hillary Clinton's person, Trump's person, which obviously just shows how biased and out of control this whole entire investigation is. And we're getting all this information from two sources that Fox News says that they confirmed, but obviously we're going to follow the story and make any retractions if any of this proves to be not true at all, just for pure clarification purposes and authenticity purposes in this broadcast.
Yeah, it's been widely reported since. Those sources aren't out there. But then again, there's not a lot of sources that have been named in anything, whether they be, I don't know, FBI informants on the payroll, Stephen Helper, or the people that are signing these documents for indictments, for FISA warrants. Again, we'll get to that Carter Page document that was released, that's 90% redacted, Luke, and 412 pages long. But the fact of the matter is, we are seeing more than bias. We're seeing a cover-up on the magnitude we've never seen before. And again, if Trump wants to be a man of the people, he needs to start going after the actual criminals like Tony Podesta and standing up for Paul Manafort. I'm sure Paul Manafort is not the best person in the world. I'm sure he's done some bad things, but
he probably has a whole bunch of skeletons in his closet too. Let's expose all of that, but let's do it equally and not make it a bipartisan investigation by the special counselor Robert Mueller, since obviously we're seeing very clear bias in this whole entire investigation that could uncover real corruption on both sides. But no, they're just playing politics here, which needs to be called out, and of course is not being called out by the mainstream media. Some independent media are, of course, calling this out, but when the situation calls for it, when it's right, we're going to call it like we see it, like we are right now.
Yeah, let's move on to the next story, Luke. And your Amy, super chat. Thank you so much. Didn't ask a question, by the way. If you do want your questions answered, folks, we will answer the super chats. But Amy, thank you so much. It's really appreciated.
Completely appreciate. Thank you so much, Amy. That's an amazing, incredible super chat. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, big timer. So let's get to this next story. Luke, you're going to lead this one in. Israel weapons found in Daesh Arms Depot.
Wait, I had the Carter Page story up next. Do you want to just get into the Carter Page thing?
Yeah, let's do. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Carter Page.
Since it's connected to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, the Mueller investigation and everything else. Let's just talk about Carter Page, which I had up next, but we might have had a little mishap here. Let's just get into that one.
All right, so for those that don't know, Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, they got the documents. They got, what documents you're about to see. And President Trump actually shouted out to them, thanking them to get these documents. Again, if Trump wants to do the right thing, because we're going to scroll through some of these documents right here, Luke, and this is what it looks like. It's very, very, very redacted. And when I say very redacted, this is a 412-page document. No kidding, 85-90% of this is blacked out. Everything in here we basically already know, and it really does show you the level of bias and corruption. And by the way, Luke, another thing that I think is very important about this document is that what is not censored really does suggest that obviously not only did Obama know, we know that the agents were reporting directly to him, that he has a larger hand in this investigation going after Carter Page as a Russian agent than has been disclosed in the past.
Yeah, this is definitely a big deal. This is definitely something very serious that does need to be discussed and does need to get out there to the general public. What effects do you think this will have on everything happening right now, Jason?
Well, I think that Trump would be a genius and brilliant to declassify the entire document and say, hey, let's lay it bare. Fusion GPS is how they got this warrant in the first place. It was a DNC political document by Hillary Clinton and her funders. They used dirty tricks. They targeted me from the beginning. And again, we're not, I just want to say this, we're not cheerleading for Trump, but this stuff is pretty obvious. And
yeah, sorry to cut you off. Even with the whole indictments that we're hearing about, all of those actions happened during the Obama administration. And Obama and his officials allegedly knew that this was happening, was documenting all of this that was happening, but didn't stop it. They only released the information right before Donald Trump had the actual meeting with Vladimir Putin just last week. So they made it, very well timed that they released all this information. And with that, and them investigating Fedor Emelianenko for being friends with Putin and fighting inside of the United States, and also with this latest information that's happening with Paul Manafort, we have to understand the laws that they're using here, because the left is declaring victory, saying, yes, there's obviously clear collusion here. But the law that they're using here, the FARA law, it's been on the books ever since the United States was scared of Nazi German incursion in U.S. politics. But it's a law that's been on the books for over 50 years now. And throughout those 50 years, only 7 people have been charged because of that specific law. 7 people over 50 years. And now, within the last few months, 3 of them have been arrested under this law, all of them connected somehow to Donald Trump. So obviously, clear, insane bias, showing you who's really in control here, showing you the worst of bipartisan politics that is not going to go after the real corruption, the real Podesta Saudi Arabia connections, but as we're clearly seeing, very politically motivated against Donald Trump, with what we're seeing, the left establishment fighting the right establishment.
Absolutely. And they are two sides of the same coin, but so many people in the mainline Republican Party did not want Donald Trump to be president, and they were vocal about it. See, that's what I don't get when I watch these ridiculous hearings that are mostly show hearings. The Democrats are always pointing to the fact that James Comey and Robert Mueller are lifelong Republicans. Like the Bush family, George Bush came out against Trump. A lot of people forget that. He said, we'll vote for Hillary. We're talking old man Bush, but he's like Hill Dog. We're going Hill Dog. The fact is that the guy was a little bit outside of their grasps. He has a lot of work to do when it comes to our foreign policy. But hey, it seems like he is putting in the work with Russia and North Korea right now. Unfortunately, a lot of these things are still, Luke, at the behest of Israel. And I think that's going to lead into the next story here. You want to get into that one? Israel weapons found in Daesh Arms Depot?
We're a little bit off because I was going to talk about the Federal Reserve, but this is
I thought you had those after that, the Podesta thing.
It doesn't matter. I'll just run with the whole Syria story because this will lead into the white helmets that need to be talked about as well. But as we know, we heard news from a lot of news outlets just a few days ago that the Israeli military was evacuating the Syrian white helmets away from the Syrian government, and with the help of the United States and European governments, they're not only evacuating them, but they're going to help them move into Europe and the United Kingdom. And there's just absolutely insane videos coming out. It's coming out that, of course, we're getting the number that there was 800 of them. There's other information that just came out recently saying that there's 422 members of the white helmets that are being evacuated and are going to be resettled in Europe and in Canada in just the next coming weeks. And if you've been just paying attention to anything that the White Helmets have been doing, people have made it a point to highlight how a lot of their supposed humanitarian workers were also donning guns and working with radical Islamic terrorists, working with ISIS, working with Al-Qaeda, and have been a propaganda arm pushing a lot for U.S. intervention and propaganda psychological warfare in that region. And it's been clear. Israel's main opponent is, of course, Iran, and they're willing to do anything and everything to go against them, including supporting radical Islamic terrorists, which they have been supporting for a very long time, especially on the Golan Heights region, which is contested between Syria and Israel. But even just a few days ago, on July 18th, it came out that Israel and their weapons were found inside of ISIS's armed depots. And as the Syrian government, along with the Russian military, make more significant gains of territory and land all over the Syrian country, they're finding more and more foreign weapons. And the weapons have been connected to Turkey, to Saudi Arabia, and of course, Israel. So this is a very, very interesting story, but it doesn't surprise us since we knew Israel has been rooting for Al-Qaeda and the radical rebels to win inside of the Syrian civil conflict that has been happening. And there's stunning videos coming out with Israeli military hanging out with Al-Qaeda inside of the Golan Heights area. There's been just utterly incredible headlines with even Israel's intelligence chief saying we don't want ISIS defeated in Syria. Even the defense minister of Israel said that he prefers the Islamic State to Iran inside of Syria. Former Al-Qaeda leaders came out and welcomed the Israeli airstrikes where the Israeli military and fighter jets were bombing the forces that were fighting them. So this is more clear and apparent than ever. Even an ex-Mossad director came out and said Israel is helping Al-Qaeda in Syria, and they have been. And that's why they're helping now evacuate the White Helmets out of that region, and they're going to be relocated all over Europe and Canada, which is going to be very interesting neighbors if you live in those countries to be next to, since there's mounting amount of evidence just showing a lot of evil actions committed by the White Helmets. So that's my side of it, Jason.
Well, you know, the other side of it is, well, they're relocating all of these members of Al-Qaeda, aka the White Helmets. They're setting up probably for another large-scale terror attack. We have not seen a global terror attack on the scale of 9/11 now. Hey, dude, it's 2018. We're about to be on the 17th anniversary of that large-scale terror attack. Now, there have been some smaller ones, but I do believe that full circle, the next large-scale terror attack aren't going to be, you know, people on the right they've demonized. I know people have talked about domestic terror forever, and there are some concerns when you, Luke, have been named as a domestic terrorist, when obviously that is not the case. But I see, you know, the bigger enemies, if you want to take down dominoes like Syria, which we just tried to do for the last 6 years militarily and failed, Luke. And if you want to go after even bigger places like Iran, which we just cut off a deal with, well, you need a large-scale false flag operation to get the nation and the world behind you.
I see that in a not likely happening inside of Syria, to be honest with you, because of the propaganda arm of the rebels, the White Helmets.
I'm not saying inside of Syria.
I'm longer being there. No. I'm saying that. Yeah. No. In inclusion. Yeah. You weren't saying that exactly. Yeah. I'm just saying it's definitely not going to happen inside of Syria, mainly because the Syrian government is on the brink of complete and utter victory, and with Trump and Putin coming to the table, it looks like that conflict is finally going to be put to rest, and there's going to be a deal made between Russia and Iran to keep Iran out of Syria, which of course Israel is going to be very happy about, and things and tensions could of course calm down, which is not good for the military-industrial complex that makes a lot of money. And you may be right about the speculative talk of there being a possible big terrorist attack, but again, that's very speculative. It wouldn't surprise me if it happens. We're going to be obviously covering it as soon as anything major happens and giving you the information and trying to be there live on the ground. But ultimately, even though a lot of people are not happy with the white helmets being evacuated, ultimately, in the bigger scheme of things, this is a good sign. This is a sign that the country could finally now could go back to normal, that a lot of the conflict has stopped, that diplomatic relations between Russia and the United States are opening up to work towards a peaceful solution towards that. And even just yesterday, it came out that France is sending medical aid to the Syrian government, to Bashar al-Assad, after they cut a deal with Russia. This is a major news article. I'm going to send it to the chat room just so everyone could see it here. But of course, you're not seeing this in many big Western publications. But yeah, France is helping with very important hospital and medical supplies towards the Syrian government in an effort to work and broker a bigger peace deal within that region. France is obviously involved since their troops, along with U.S. troops, are there still currently in Syria. Our troops, we have boots on the ground right now. No one's talking about it inside of Syria because of Donald Trump's very aggressive actions in that region. But it looks like from everything that I'm seeing that this conflict is definitely de-escalating. The truth is coming out. They're finding more and more Israeli weapons in the hands of ISIS and the territory that ISIS held. And a lot of this is coming out to the general public, which is a good thing, and hopefully will bring more peace, which also is something to worry about, as you said, because that's not really good for the military-industrial complex, Jason.
No, and hear me out. I don't think that we're in any imminent threat of a large-scale Western terror attack in the next few weeks, months, or maybe even year. What I'm saying is with the relocation of 800 white helmets in westernized societies in Europe like Britain, it's going to be easier for them to get a passport to the United States, Canada again, these type of things. Down the road, when it's election season for that 2020 run, well, something bad happens in 2019. Donald Trump could not keep us safe. We need to go after Iran where he failed and Syria where he failed. It's a great narrative for the globalists to take military action there. Again, I hope it never comes to fruition. But when you have a group, Al-Qaeda, that was basically created by Western intelligence anyway through the Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden against the Russians, it is not beyond the pale that these same assets could be used later on.
Well, of course not, and that's very important to highlight, because if it wasn't for Saudi Arabia, Israel, Turkey, and the United States, ISIS wouldn't have the foothold that they had. They wouldn't have the operations and propaganda that they had. They were selling oil. They were confiscating oil from the Syrian government, selling it to Turkey directly, where even the Russians had satellite photos of ISIS's operation where they were financing radical Islamic terrorism all over the Western world, using the best camera footage and cinematography that they had in order to spread their Wahhabist radical Islamic teachings, along with the help of Saudi Arabia, which is great at that too, all over the Western world, which has sparked up a lot, if not the majority, of all the terrorist attacks that happened in the Western world. So when we look at this, this is the connection that people in the mainstream media will never make, but the people who allowed them to happen are responsible for it. And if you want to stop it, you have to address it. So it's good that this conflict is coming down to an end, but it's also sad that it's mainly this organization and I think one or two others that are talking about this very issue, not afraid to say the I word, and connecting the dots and trying to hold them responsible. Because if you really want to prevent further things like this from happening, you have to make sure that the people who did this, the people who are committing the crimes, who are allowing the crimes, who are pushing for these crimes, are held accountable for them. Jason, what's the next story you have lined up?
What do we have any more? I think we just we went through every single one.
Well, we had the Federal Reserve story.
Oh yeah, that's right. We skipped over that. Yes. So the Federal Reserve story. This is actually another thing that would get me on that Trump train. This is out of CNBC. Their source is Dick Bove. Trump poised to take control of the Federal Reserve. Wow, that would be it's too good to be true. I admit this one, Luke. It's too good to be true. But can you imagine a president taking control of the not so Federal Reserve and saying enough is enough? We're not going to print money out of nowhere, and we're not going to go by what basically is a Rothschild bank scheme where we charge interest on zeros and ones we create from thin air, and then we print money like it's newspaper. I mean,
well,
how do you
the main
feel?
problem, the main problem with the Federal Reserve is its collusion with the private sector and just the socialism that they ultimately spread to their friends and buddies, playing economics, mainly benefiting the inner circle that they're connected with instead of everyone else, while we're getting screwed and the purchasing power of our dollar goes down. Think about how much things were just 10 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. You're losing the power of your dollar. This is great for people who are in debt, nations who are in debt, but look what bought you at the grocery store for $20 a couple years ago. Look what it buys you now, and it's only going to get worse. Now, the CNBC article that we're referencing here does have a very sensational, hyperbolic headline. They definitely used great clickbait here, to say the least. But if you look at the video of what they referenced, Trump's pretty much talking about the interest rates. He's talking about the debt. He's talking about the unfair trading situations that the United States has with Europe and working that out. And they said this statement that he's going to take control of the Federal Reserve because Donald Trump has 4 vacancies to fill on the board of governors of the Federal Reserve, and he will select those people to be in those positions. So obviously it's going to be a little bit more of a politicized Fed, but also, a lot of people, you're talking about the Trump train, Jason. I'm not very happy with the people Trump has surrounded himself with people like Pompeo and John Bolton, Mad Dog Mathis, and all these other crazy bloodthirsty lunatics who directly suck off the teeth of the military-industrial complex and do the bidding of the war machine, which, of course, the right-wing establishment is very well known for pushing. And even though it's a good sign that there's a little bit of a peace in North Korea, there's finally some relations opened up with Russia, the Iran situation is definitely going to be a major one. As we covered earlier on in this broadcast, it was Netanyahu and the Israeli government that were bragging that they were the ones who convinced the United States to end the Iran nuclear deal. And it is Iran and Israel who are both going back and forth saying how they're going to nuke each other and kill each other. This brings not a good situation for the rest of the world, especially with how convincing and how much of an influence that Israel has on American politics. So that is definitely a danger that I don't see going away, and it being a very, very, very major one, since the alleged deep state, or really just the intelligence communities, have been having a hard-on for Iran for decades now and been wanting intervention and regime change in that region for many years now. So yeah, that's just my take on it. Anything else you want to say about that, Jason?
No, I think that about wraps it up. But I know that we did want to go.
I'm seeing a comment here. Trump wants Afghanistan wars over too. Well, if Trump wants something as the leader, the chief of the U.S. military, he would end it. He's not. So Afghanistan has been one of the things that has been very crucial and a very big step backwards to not only what he promised, but it's also dragging our feet on a war that's lasted over 17 years. And if you look at Afghanistan, like, why the hell are we even in that country? Why is the world's opium coming out of that country? There's so much corruption. There's no way of fixing it. There's no way to bring democracy to Afghanistan. That will never happen. They are their own people. They have their own way of life. They're, the whole idea, the whole premise, the whole ideas that they're trying to push on them will never realize. And we saw in the independent media community, even about a year ago, with people screaming, saying, no, Trump's going to do it. Sorry, it hurts to do this. I'm not even going to do this. People saying that Trump is definitely going to pull out the military. He's just making, it's just going to be a few more months. And then Trump announced, we're not leaving anytime soon, and we're not going to tell you when we're leaving. I want to highlight this because people made predictions specifically saying, my throat hurts too much, that 100% Donald Trump was going to make sure that the troops leave in a year. It's been a year. Troops are still there, and the troops are not going anytime soon away from that region. You want to help me with some of this, Jason? My throat.
No, Luke, don't you understand? We're all going to be singing Kumbaya together this time next year. I have my sources. I've sat down with QAnon.
Did you
President
talk to Q?
Trump?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no. President Trump, myself, QAnon, the Tooth Fairy, and Santa Claus himself sat down and we discussed how we were going to bring Bashir al-Assad to the table and we were going to hash it out with Iran. And then little squirrel elves came and they agreed.
The QAnon definitely blew up in someone's face when they were saying that they talked to him, and then QAnon released information saying that the person they talked to was a shill, and with the other riddles that were happening there. It's just utter nonsense what we're seeing in this field. But that's why we always appreciate all of you guys who are watching this news broadcast. This broadcast wouldn't be possible for you. Again, we're of course going to be answering your super chats. I'm keeping an eye on the regular chats to see if anything comes up that we could actually talk to all of you guys about. Super chats priorities because, we don't sell out and shill like other people. And it's difficult to have your morality when it comes to profit motives that other people prioritize over. So you always have to understand that, especially when you're watching this content, and how much we really rely on you guys and your support to keep us going. We just got another super chat by Axiom, and the super chat is, do you know David Pakman? I saw some of his YouTube videos. I have never met him in person. He's like a left-wing kind of YouTuber, right, Jason?
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff too. He says he's progressive.
Is it good? Is it like
he's all right. He's got a decent following. He did the Rogan podcast. I saw part of that. I feel like he plays too much party line politics. Love to debate him on any given issue. I think we could find some common ground for sure, but I think that we'd have a lot to disagree on as well.
See, I think the main thing that the left and the right all agree on is that anything getting too big, whether it's government or corporation, should not happen. It's not each other that we should be fighting, but it's really the people who are screwing us over with immunity, with the power of law enforcement that are violating our human rights. There's been so many things that just violate the non-aggression principles that are utterly just stupid. I was just here walking down. I actually met someone here that works for the government, spent some time with them here, and they're all like, government's great, government's good. And I'm like, this is just ridiculous. This is just utterly insane and stupid what's happening all around the world. And then she made one comment about, the free market's giving you, plastic to put your groceries in. And I'm like, No. I mean, if I want to buy plastic, I'll have plastic, and you have to pay extra for that here in Europe especially. But we should be using hemp. Hemp material is recyclable. It doesn't destroy and damage the environment like plastic does, but plastic is used because it's incentivized with all the freaking subsidies and support that they get from the government. And at the same time, hemp, because it's close to the marijuana plant, is utterly illegal when it could replace all of the plastic in this world and not damage and destroy this economy. But God forbid it's connected to a little plant that gets you high, hungry, horny sometimes, and just reflecting back on your entire life. God forbid that happens. God forbid you smoke a little bit of that, Jason. God forbid you do all that. You know, so there's always different perspectives. I'm not really a big fan of the progressives. I understand where they're coming from. I do think that they are a lot more rational than a lot of the hardcore Democratic old establishment. And it is nice to see some of the new wave people come in there and kind of take over that old stagnant, can't win anything, defeatist, ugly, Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton filled cesspool that is the Democratic establishment. But that's just my own personal opinion on it.
You know, speaking of the cesspool Democratic establishment, and by the way, I don't think this is a right or left.
Wait, we got another question that I just wanted to ask. I'm sorry for cutting you off. They're saying WeAreChange won't argue with David Pacman because he criticizes Trump too much. We're down, baby. Let's do this. Let's get the debate going. We're not afraid of anything here. It's all about putting up your ideas. We aren't afraid to admit we're wrong sometimes. We are wrong sometimes. No one's perfect, and we try to make up for it by telling you guys that we made a mistake, that we made an error. But when it comes to debate, let's go. Let's bring this up. I'm going to try to reach out to David Pacman. If anyone has a personal contact with him, I think it'll be great to talk about one issue that we agree on and one issue that we totally disagree on. I think it'll be great, great YouTube stuff that we have there. Sorry, Jason.
No, I was just going to talk about a couple of the stories that we did do this week on videos involving, Nexium and Gun, because there are two that have stayed demonetized, by the way, because the information in them is just too hot to handle. I guess we can't talk about those realities. But when you're talking about,
you did a great job on the Nexium documentary. By the way, we released, Jason Bermas mainly produced and edited a short documentary about Nexium. Very well done. Definitely recommend people checking out on our YouTube channel. Okay, we got another question here. Oh, wait, sorry, Jason, I cut you off.
No, because we're going to get into this
thing.
Let's read it, because I'm looking at this. Have you heard Q said that JFK Jr. is alive? I have not heard that one. If that's an actual Q post, I mean, I wouldn't think that it could be, way. The next thing we'll find out is that the Trix Rabbit is also for real, along with the Lucky Charms Leprechaun, and they've come to fight the deep state in Guantanamo Bay. That could be the next post tonight.
Mr. Roosevelt, you should ask someone who says he talks to QAnon regularly and gets the insider information for his news show about that very specific question. But no, I haven't heard JFK Jr. is alive. I would need some evidence. I would need some proof, please, to see that.
He's been covering all this time, and we've got him exclusively on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, JFK Jr. All right, I can't. But anyway,
I wish I could do it's hard, man. It hurts my throat.
I can't do it more than like 2 minutes.
I'm not in a good place. I'm not in a good place to do this now. I would join you, Jason, but I can't. It hurts.
But aside from that, I encourage people to check it out. The Darkest Nexium Secrets Revealed. And that in itself does show you some connections no one else is going to show you, especially with Hillary Clinton. When you talk about the Bronfmans, Edgar Bronfman in particular, he's not just some billionaire who likes alcohol. It's not just Seagram's ginger ale, folks. They're heavily invested in the entertainment industry, hence why I think they had connections, and people like Allison Mack, other actresses and models were kind of attracted to this cult. But he was also Edgar Bronfman Sr., the head of the World Jewish Congress, Luke, and given the Medal of Freedom by Bill Clinton himself, Hillary Clinton, a personal friend. We document all this stuff in there. But what I found even more bizarre is this guy, Frank Parletto, that basically took this story national. And by the way, was working for Nexium after he was introduced by the infamous Roger Stone, also something we cover in this.
Roger Stone? You mean the Roger Stone connected to Trump?
That Roger Stone, that very same gentleman. Who knew?
He is a freak. Roger Stone is a freak. I've been around him, and I just even the stuff he says in public when the cameras aren't on. You're a freak, dude. He's a total freak. So it does. Personally, I don't know why is Roger Stone a part of this?
Yeah. Well, again, Parletto, who is the one that broke it and was doing financial work for the Bronfmans, says that Claire Bronfman told him that her father, Edgar Bronfman Sr., working with the Illuminati, defrauded her of $65 million in a stock and commodities investment. That's wild enough. So, that's a big story. And because it has, by the way, at the end we talk about NT Lawyer and Crazy Days and Nights, the blog that called out Weinstein years ago. The blog that called out Spacey years ago. The blog that called out Lauer years ago. And there's other posts I didn't put in this documentary that connect NXIVM to Epstein and his island, as well as Dershowitz. Okay?
Wow.
That's something that I think that people need to look into. And because we're talking about, quote unquote, aspects of pedogate and the James Gunn thing, I know we haven't really discussed this, Luke. But James Gunn made
explain it to me. Who is James Gunn?
So, for those that don't know, James Gunn is the director of Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. And I'm actually a big fan of those movies. I think they're excellent.
Yeah, I like those movies too.
Yeah. I think they're going to stand the test of time. They're making number 3. Now, James Gunn comes from Troma. And do you know what Troma is?
No.
Okay, so if you don't know what the Toxic Avenger is, or Kabuki Man, or Schlock Shock style horror is, well, then you're not Jason Bermas, because this stuff's been around since the 80s, and this is the kind of movie, Nukem High, Return to Nukem High, that's basically just one big, long-running, disgusting joke. Okay, it's schlock humor, it's people getting decapitated, it's people getting raped. I'm going to be honest, that's in there sometimes too. And all of it is for dark and weird humor. Okay, he got his start in Troma in a movie called Tromeo and Juliet. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be investigated for his claims or that he should have kept his job. I'm saying that this was pretty quick and swift mob justice based on some tweets with not a lot of evidence to back up that he was a pedophile. Now, an open secret joined Mike Cernovich, Jack Posbiak, in kind of taking him down, and I totally respect an open secret. But my question is, Luke, why aren't people like Bryan Singer, which an open secret is about, and his ilk in jail while this guy's walking around free?
Yeah, this is an issue that's not really easy to talk about, but needs to be talked about on many different levels. I mean, sending out tweets is one thing, but there needs to be some kind of investigation. It's very difficult to comprehend a lot of these actions that people would actually go out and do horrible things on such an extreme level, because we don't expect people to do things that we normally wouldn't. But this is more prevalent than you guys think. Especially people connected to the establishment and all the horrible stuff they do, and the cover up of it is very prevalent, and a lot of people have been getting away with it. And this is something that is just sickening, just utterly sickening, knowing that a lot of powerful people do this, they get away with this. A lot of people connected to Hollywood do this, get away with this. And sexual abuse is one of the worst actions and crimes you could commit against another human being. And it needs to be taken seriously. And the kind of complacency that we have seen from news organizations like the BBC when it comes to just atrocious incidences, whether it was their prime minister, whether it was Jimmy Savile, whether what's happening now with the legal court battles with Epstein. This is something that is an outcry, and this is something that people use as a justification for government and the use of force. And I think at the very least, there needs to be a deep, in-depth investigation into the majority of this stuff, and some brave people to come out against it and to just shine the light on horrible, horrible things that happen. But there's a reason that they want people to not talk about any of this, and they try to make words like Pizzagate out there and have people who are discredited pushing crazy theories out there to make everyone talking about these issues just look totally discredited. But again, with some of the historical aspects, very least needs to be a severe investigation, especially into the top echelons of Hollywood and also Washington, D.C., which we have yet to see the huge expose on. as we have been seeing through Hollywood that has been being exposed within the last few months, with a lot of the victims finally coming out and talking about the rampant sex abuse and child sex abuse that has been happening in that industry.
Yeah, and there was one other thing that people are starting to talk about and actually causing the tweets of this person to be pulled as well. But Lloyd Kaufman, who's the founder of Troma Entertainment, and he's actually, in Gunn's own words, if you watch the video, his personal hero brought him into it. Of course, he took to Twitter yesterday and put out a video in support of Gunn. But there was a tweet out there where basically Lloyd Kaufman made a joke about mentoring James Gunn at NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, after Gunn had made a similar NAMBLA tweet. So this upset me, and what upset me even more is there was a picture of Lloyd Kaufman with Tony Podesta and his wife. So, we put this in the video, and lo and behold, Luke, I actually have a source very close to Lloyd Kaufman. In fact, you know this person too. After the show, I'll probably tell you who it is, but I've known them for well over a decade, and they've known Lloyd Kaufman for over a decade. So I just asked him, I said, hey, what do you know about this? And he says, listen, man, I know that Lloyd Kaufman isn't involved in anything like this. He's the furthest thing from that. I promise you. And he even told me he would ask him about his connection to Podesta today when he saw him. So, I want to believe that. I'm not saying that, we should just take somebody's word for it. But I would like to say that that is a real connection. That's not a QAnon connection. I actually, truth be told, after I made the video, the entire office of Troma watched the video. So I thought that was pretty neat. So, again, in the entertainment industry, the other thing is that Troma is so outside of Hollywood and it's so anti-Hollywood, I would hope that they wouldn't endorse the kind of things that we've seen happen to Corey Feldman, happen to Corey Haim, happen to people on the sets of Nickelodeon shows. There's a lot of talk that Dan Schneider, information on him is going to drop after Nickelodeon dropped him over 6 months ago. A guy who made many, 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 many hit shows, including iCarly and others for Nickelodeon. So people have to realize this isn't a game. This is, Patton Oswalt wants to joke about being a pedophile because his friend James Gunn got fired. That's not the way to handle it, Patton. That's not the way to handle it at all.
And the cover-up is very severe, like we saw with Kevin Spacey, where one of his victims, who was a little boy, came out saying that he was sexually abused by Kevin Spacey, and then the media was like, oh, Kevin Spacey issued a statement saying he's gay. This is great that he's coming out of the closet. That's ultimately what they were talking about, totally ignoring this huge other aspect of the story, which is just utterly ridiculous. So when it comes to this, it's always important to hear the victims, investigate it, not always jump to conclusions, but actually rely on actual information. And we have not seen nothing yet, people. We haven't seen anything. We're only beginning to see it with some of the exposés that are happening inside of Hollywood. But it gets a lot bigger and a lot deeper than that. Jason, we got some more super chats that I think we should get into. One by the Last American Vadabond, who says, appreciate your work. You might have covered it. What are your thoughts on Israel bombing Syria today in relation to the White Helmet evacuation? Now, obviously, we talked about the White Helmet evacuation. I just looked up quickly on all the major news networks. I'm not seeing anything about Israel bombing Syria. I am seeing that Russian and Syrian fighter jets have been bombing the Islamic State and other rebel territories along the Israel-Jordan border. This is where Israel evacuated the White Helmets that are going to be relocated inside of Europe and Canada, with very interesting neighbors now to a lot of different people, since there's mounting evidence showing the White Helmets in collaboration, working, and even holding guns with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other radical Islamic terrorist groups. But I'm going to look into the story of Israel bombing Syria. They have been doing that for a very long time. Al-Qaeda has applauded them, thanked them for bombing Syria and the Syrian, Iranian, Russian forces. Mainly Israel has been bombing Iranian and Syrian forces that have been fighting against them in that region. So thank you, the Last American Vadabond, for that question. And then we have a little contentious one. Zach Petty, why are we blaming Trump for the military-industrial complex? He does not have full control. Well, Zach, it's you could argue the level of control that Trump has, but there's a reason they called him the commander in chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. The president has made many decisions which publicly came out were influenced by the people around him. He was ultimately the man who called the shots on bombing Syria twice in support of the rebel groups, in support of Israel, against the people who were fighting Iranian, Syrian, Russian forces, the people who go into the Western countries and bomb other places. He was the main proponent behind the Iran nuclear deal. The military-industrial complex has a very vast influence of American politics. That's why the United States has nearly been at war every single year past World War II and has commanded many operations that were not pleasant and did not end in the benefit of all people. Donald Trump has made public statements before saying civilian life, in short reference, doesn't really matter. Who cares about the civilian life? And civilian casualties have skyrocketed. The drone program and the bombing program that Barack Obama proliferated is being continued with its expansion and trajectory of growth under Donald Trump, who, again, has been making very, very strong, war hawkish military decisions. Sure, give him credit on North Korea. Sure, give him credit now on bettering relations with Russia, even though we'll see how that goes because he put his foot in his mouth and then said he didn't mean to say what he said, even though the following sentences he was saying afterwards contradicted that, which again shows him cowering and doing what other people expect of him. So the military-industrial complex does have a big influence. Obviously, their stocks went down after the North Korea peace deal, but the stocks got up when Trump sent those bombs and those Tomahawk cruise missiles against the Syrian government. So ultimately, when it comes to this, I believe that the military-industrial complex, how Trump is acting, trying to change some of his statements because of pressure, the military-industrial complex is one of the most efficient lobbyist industries in Washington, D.C., the most lucrative, the most effective, and the most one that is in charge of not only our government, of not only our elected officials, but also the mainstream media, which highlights representatives of the military-industrial complex and the people who are paid by the military-industrial complex to be their military experts, their, quote, analysts, or whatever the made-up fake news term they made for each other, which ultimately stands for, I'm getting paid by the war machine to spread more war and panic and fear and hatred of another fellow man that lives thousands and thousands of miles away from you, for the pure benefit of just a few extra money in my pockets, even though it causes great human suffering all around the world. That's ultimately what's happening. There's no denying it.
Luke,
there's not that big of, yeah, go ahead.
Just to let you know, your video froze about 2 minutes ago, although we still got your audio. Just want to let you know, I'm not sure if you're going to want to hang up. What's that?
My video's working on my end.
I know, but you're completely frozen on this end. If you look at the stream, your Skype is completely frozen. Yeah. So I'm just letting you know. I don't know if you want to hang up and try to call back. If you want to wrap it up after the military-industrial complex rant. I think it is important to point out that the man has said one thing and done another. I mean, just look at his policy with Julian Assange that we started this program off with. You know, if he wanted to talk about how he loved WikiLeaks, well, again, there wouldn't be an indictment. He wouldn't be extradited to the United States. He wouldn't be under charges of treason or colluding with Russia or the Imagination Land charges that they're going to bring against him for, again, doing something in the public interest and releasing documents that we all deserve to see.
Oh, yeah, 100% agree with you. We got another super chat from Pete saying, "Yo, Luke, I'm still waiting in Porto with open arms." Pete, I don't know what you're waiting for, but I love Porto and I didn't really want to leave that place. And I was very sad for leaving that place, but I definitely will be back. It's an amazing, beautiful, gorgeous city that is so affordable, great human beings, and one of the best food. Like, the food there is just incredible. My goodness, the food that they have there, so affordable. The cakes that they had there, they had this layered, what was it called? Chart cake, or I forgot the name of it. The chicken that they have there, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm getting hungry. My video's working on my end, Jason. It has to be a problem on your end, but we could definitely call it a night. We've been live for an hour and 20 minutes. I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for watching us and being a part of this broadcast and leaving comments, especially the super chats that keep us independent. Amy, seriously, wow. Thank you again, Amy Peterson. You are awesome and an incredible human being. Appreciate you more than you know. So love you, all of you guys. Love doing this. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit more. Keep me in the loop. Let me know if there's any specific stories you want me to cover while I am in Europe. Again, you can message me on twitter.com/Luke WeAreChange. It's the best way to communicate with me, and I very much look forward to hearing your responses. Just in short, love you guys. Jason, anything else you want to say?
No, I love you guys too, and thank you guys all for watching. Check it out. We've been doing 7 videos a week, and we're going to keep pumping them out for you over at the youtube.com/WeAreChange.
All right.